A man moving from the dictatorial Middle East to the democratic United States and subsequently bagging on the electoral process. This ought to be good. So yeah, this episode's going to showcase Bassem Youssef taking issue with the United States of America's election process, mainly based on flaws found in essentially all representative democracies. It's never going to stop being funny to me how Bassem can leave a democratic dictatorship where everything is rigged, in his own words, to give a 99% majority vote to that existing leader and rip on a nation that has an election system that is, to any extent, better than the one he left behind. Dude, if you're guaranteed to have a fixed election in your home country, but you have a chance in your new nation, I'd say you've upgraded. Now, I will give Bassem some credit in this video as he points out an election flaw that's present in most representative democracies, but overall, he's just whining about peanuts here. Or chickpeas, I guess. You'll get the reference later in the video.
Where I come from, the 99% means something entirely different than it does here. For us, it's the percentage by which our democratically elected dictators are guaranteed to win every single time. But things are different here. America is the world's shining example of how to hold a free and fair election, right?
Honestly, no. I wouldn't say that they're the shining example for several reasons. There are serious issues with how closely the media is involved in the election process through extremely biased reporting. The Electoral College can be a bit of a farce that removes a lot of the final decision-making power from the average voter, but it does have its benefits. And as we've seen in the primary process, the parties themselves often wind up conspiring against their own candidates in order to pursue a particular outcome. Yeah, I'm with you, Bassem, insofar as to say that the United States has a flawed electoral system. But I have to give them credit because for a nation that has one of the most, if not the most powerful militaries in the entire world, when was the last time you heard of a military coup in the United States? People are hungry for power by their very nature, that's just what people do, and yet no one's pulled a military uprising in America? Give credit where credit's due.
Listen, you're not perfect. Everyone in the world knows what happened in Florida in your 2000 election.
Yep. Political cronyism and a flawed voting system resulted in one of the most impactful occasions of election fraud in American history. Old news, but I'll assume you have a point. Go on.
December 12th, 2000. Americans finally know who their next president will be. Republican George W. Bush becomes president-elect after a divided U.S. Supreme Court effectively halts recounts in Florida's contested presidential vote tally.
Okay, we get it. The US fucked up huge in the 2000 election, and the Supreme Court helped get Junior into the White House, more likely than not, based off of his daddy's influence and financial dealings. Yes, this probably fixed election fucked over the United States like nobody's business, but can you find something newer to go off of? You know, like, maybe something to do with a certain Clinton candidate? If I turn up dead in a ditch somewhere in the next couple weeks, you know who to suspect.
Very embarrassing. But never again. It was just an off year. Everyone was too busy worrying about Y2K.
Now, I don't think Y2K was to blame, but I agree that it wouldn't happen again. George W. Bush was the only president that I can think of in modern history who was forced to abandon the traditional walk to his inauguration ceremony because hordes of people protested it over the obvious corruption that led to his election. Here, though, I'm not a fan of Michael Moore's conduct. This clip from Fahrenheit 9/11 is factually representative of what happened at Bush's inauguration.
Inauguration coverage, 2001, on a nasty, but it could be worse kind of day in Washington.
Now, imagine if something like this were to happen again, in the age of social media and social uprising that we live in. No, I don't think anything quite like this could ever happen again in the US, at least not so blatantly. Now, of course, I'm not speaking about the protest of a presidential election. We've all seen how Trump's election has gone over so far. But I am speaking about the blatant attempt to rig an election, and it's been shown that in the age of openness, if you will, that Hillary Clinton's attempts to circumnavigate things in the DNC, and really her success in getting around Bernie Sanders, it comes to light. So, shiftily sliding past everyone, really, it's not going to fly anymore.
And to make sure, I went to Florida to see for myself how you guys have put democracy back on course. I sat down with Scott Maxwell of the Orlando Sentinel, who's been covering elections in Florida for nearly 20 years.
Alright, as per usual, I'm going to give you a little background on the person that Bassem has chosen to interview. Now yes, I've foregone this in the past for individuals who I don't think are being presented as experts, but in the cases of Casey Dinges of the ASCE and Kevin Walker of Boardwalk Brand Strategy, Bassem was putting them forth as experts in their fields, and I think those types of claims or inferences, implied or explicit, need to be analyzed before we just accept their words as fact. So, Scott Maxwell of the Orlando Sentinel, what do we know about him? Well, his credentials seem to pan out, and although his "it's all politics" bit in his bio had me concerned I might be dealing with one of the regressive left, the whole personal is political types, Maxwell's columns seem targeted at rooting out corruption, collusion, and general political malpractice. From what I can tell, stand-up journalist. Let's get on with the show.
Let's go back to the 2000 presidential elections. What did Florida teach the rest of the country?
Yeah, we had some problems.
Understatement of the year. But at least he delivered it in a way as to make the comedic understatement obvious. Bassem, you could learn some stuff from this guy.
That was one of the first times that politicians, particularly here in Florida, realized if we can play games with some of these elections, we can stack the deck in our favor. And other states started following.
Now, I'm no expert in Florida's election processes, but I will say this about conducting elections. Nihil sub sole novum. Or, of course, there is nothing new under the sun. Essentially, there's not much out there that hasn't been done, and if it can still be done, then you can bet it's being done. This is an unfortunate consequence of a disinterested population that doesn't know about the other voting systems that exist in the world, which would mitigate or eliminate the problems common to first past the post and other similar electoral systems. To compound these issues, you also have to deal with the somewhat adversarial state-federal power dynamic in the US, and that's a can of worms I'm going to leave sealed for the moment. Maybe in another video I'll take a swing at explaining that shit show.
I thought that every vote in America counts.
Some votes count more than others. The politicians in Florida have done a really good job of trying to silence the voters they didn't like.
Scott Maxwell opened my eyes.
Well, shit. It's about time someone managed to enlighten you on something. I'd somewhat hoped that I'd be the one to do it, you know, narcissism and all, but as long as you're getting shit straightened out, I won't whine over a moderately bruised ego.
Your voting process is more complicated than I thought. I started digging a little deeper, and that's when I discovered something else you guys do called gerrymandering.
Ah, finally. Something that is perfectly reflected in both the Canadian and American election systems. Gerrymandering. Now, I'd love to explain it all to you, as it's an extremely influential practice, and I feel as though I have the political science education to be in my true element there, but you've been listening to enough of my voice, and another YouTube content creator who goes by the moniker CGP Grey has a series of videos that do a fantastic job of explaining the wide variety of issues with common electoral systems. If you want a little bit of a refresher on all of that, you can head over to CGP's channel. I will have a link in the description below.
What exactly is gerrymandering? Packing is the process of drawing district lines and packing in your opponents like cattle. Cracking spreads these supporters out among many districts, denying your opponent a lot of votes.
Unfortunately, drawing these lines is still a requirement in any situation where the electorate, that is to say the people, want to have local representatives with whom they feel a certain level of connection and familiarity. The problem happens when the lines are strategically drawn in order to benefit the candidates, rather than the people that elect them.
Whoa. Moving all those lines around the map seems complicated. But it turns out that's just the tip of the election manipulation iceberg. Miles Gray has his boots on the ground working as a campaign tracker, or as we call them in the Middle East, a spy.
Although his description of the campaign tracker's job seems sinister, I can't say that I disagree with Bassem in that. What a tracker does is essentially a form of subterfuge. I think covert agent is a little more accurate, as an agent may take action to influence events, where a spy most commonly sticks to gathering information, but that's really just semantics. Let it be known that I disagree with the use of trackers by political parties or candidates, and mark this down as one of the rare occasions where Bassem and I agree on something.
A tracker is someone who follows around candidates, get an ear on what's going on in their campaign, and report that back. Basically, you're the eyes and ears for your campaign against this person.
So how does a tracker change the outcome of a certain election or campaign?
Now, from his opening description of a tracker's duties, just following a candidate on the campaign trail and reporting what they've been doing doesn't really seem to be devious or underhanded. But it's what comes next that really starts to paint the true picture of why trackers are such a dirty part of the election process.
Sometimes you have to create a moment, because the 24-hour news cycle loves a big, juicy gaffe or slip-up from a candidate. That form of tracking is definitely, I think, the most spy-like. You're going in, you're not supposed to be filming, and you somehow get that really juicy clip or soundbite.
Again, my issue with definitions comes up over the whole spy thing, but either way, this is what I hate about trackers. Anyone who is paid to cause a problem is a problem. Save for, I suppose, like professional card cheats and safecrackers who are paid to test the effectiveness of security measures and stress testing. But that really isn't what we're talking about here. This is unwanted, direct or near direct interference in someone's campaign. I'm going to remove the next bit, as it's a couple seconds of covertly recorded footage from a speaking engagement that Mitt Romney was at, and it doesn't really hold any meat for this video. Essentially, it's just an example of the kind of thing a tracker does.
A campaign I worked on for a pretty powerful member of Congress was to follow around this Congress member's opposition, who was doing very strong in the polls.
So you were assigned to create a gaffe.
Now there's something in this video clip coming up next that leaves me unsure as to what extent I think a tracker can call their efforts justified. If a person holds certain views or has certain issues that are likely to impact their ability to govern properly or in good faith, then I think the citizenry has a right to know about it. However, you'll see here that some pretty devious methods can be used to bring such an issue to light or to create the appearance of an issue where none existed. And that's really where I have a problem with this whole thing. It's the creation of non-traversies, if you will.
Our opposition candidate was going to be speaking at a high school. I met a group of high school students. We'd throw pizza parties, have them come through, we'd have a great time, laugh, 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 and then gave them some flip cameras, sent them with a list of questions, and just said, hopefully they just screw up royally.
See, there it is. That's where I think this all crosses the line. Recording someone's public statements isn't something I have a problem with, and even just having a candidate holding social meets for young people, hell, there's an apathy problem with most high schoolers in regards to politics, and I'm of the camp that thinks civic education needs a much larger part in schools. Of course, only speaking from my own experience up here in Canada, but still, you can never have enough accurate information made available to you when it comes to how elections are conducted, etc. But when you're handing high school students cameras and question lists, you've crossed the line from education to indoctrination, and that's not cool.
Now Sharon Angle was recently talking to a group of Hispanic students in a school.
You know, I don't know that all of you are Latino. Some of you look a little more Asian to me. I don't know that.
And of course, you can only imagine the kind of loaded questions she was asked by one of these incentivized high schoolers. I'm not usually one to assume, but I'd bet it was something along the lines of the classic example, quote, "When did you stop beating your spouse?" End quote. There's just no way to give a succinct answer to that question without something or someone being able to spin it to make you look horrible. Well, when did you stop beating your spouse? Well, I've never beat my spouse. Well, that's not answering the question. There's no way to kind of weasel your way out of certain questions being asked, and it's all in how loaded they are when they're posed.
Now, all of a sudden, this candidate is painted as completely out of touch with like race relations. And ultimately, that helped get enough of a swing in votes, especially with Hispanics and minorities, to show, okay, this person is completely out of touch.
So, as I said, I'm somewhat conflicted on the issue of exposing held biases in regards to political candidates. This woman's statement, while the result of ambush questioning, was something that you shouldn't need political coaching to know not to say while on the campaign trail. Is it possible that this woman actually has an issue with generalizing people based on the appearance of their race alone, and that it could have influenced her ability to govern or the way in which she might have governed? Sure. Absolutely. But I don't think fabricating an issue through the use of impressionable students, I really don't think that's the way to go about bringing something into the open.
So a bunch of high school students, lured in by a pizza party, went in with their cell phones and they completely buried the candidate.
Essentially, yeah.
Alright, in before anyone cries out about kids and pizza in politics, get out. Just leave. I'm not going over that shit here. So just see yourselves to the door. I'll wait. And again, don't let the door hit you on the ass on the way out. I don't want ass prints on my new door. So with that covered, I get that the tracker's job is a dirty one. But when you start using terms like lured, the whole thing takes a really deviant sort of turn, and even I don't think it's fair to paint this guy with that kind of brush. The guy's getting paid to do a dirty job. He's not a child molester. Maybe the allusion to child predation was accidental, but I can't help but think, with the tone of this video series, that Bassem intentionally phrased his summary that way.
Seems like you guys are going to a lot of trouble to just rig an election. I miss the simplicity of just being beaten with a stick if you vote for the wrong guy.
Well, shit, Bassem, would you look at this? It just so happens you can still get continuing service airfare from New York's JFK International all the way back to Cairo, Egypt via Istanbul. And it's only like $800 Canadian, so you apply the whole US exchange rate and you're looking at like, I don't know, $100. I guess if you prefer being beaten up over your vote, getting back to a country where you can expect such treatment isn't that hard to do. Oh, you'd better hurry though. It says here there's only 2 tickets left at this price, and you must really want to go back to Egypt as soon as possible, right? No? Yeah, that's what I thought.
Why not just ditch the election altogether and keep the same guy forever? Or let the military decide your 2016 election is expected to cost at least $5 billion. Do you know how many puppet governments you could install with that?
Enough to have a decent shot at solving almost all of the problems that drove you out of Egypt on fear of imprisonment and possibly worse, and maybe even stabilize a few other Middle Eastern dictatorships? I don't know, I'm just taking a guess.
That's enough money to buy 2.5 billion pints of hummus, or 1.25 billion quarts of hummus.
Am I being trolled? Seriously. Don't mess with the Zohan? Are you fucking kidding me? I feel like Ashton Kutcher is gonna kick down my fucking door and scream, "You just got punked!" while I sit here, dazed and confused in my boxers, wondering what the fuck is going on. Seriously, you're bringing up one of the shittiest, most non-PC Adam Sandler movies ever made right now, in a video, hosted by a channel that has a distinctly PC flavor to it. And I'm not supposed to think that this is all just being some elaborate, idiotic troll job? Oh, fuck. What has life become? What is reality?
But who needs that much hummus?
Another day, another episode of the Regressive Handbook. And what have we learned? Well, gerrymandering is essentially unavoidable. Bassem Youssef seems to believe that if a democratic system has any flaws, that you might as well have a violent militaristic dictatorship. and that you could buy a metric fuck ton of hummus with the amount of money that the 2016 election cost. Interesting stuff. Now, regardless of how flawed America's system can be, I think it's laudable that they maintain a democracy when they also have such a strong military presence and a strong history of former military personnel serving at some of the highest levels of government. But with that, we come to the close of this video, and as always, I would like to thank my wonderful patrons for all of their financial and moral support. Without you guys, I wouldn't be able to do what I do. To anyone wondering about what benefits are extended to my patrons, I'm back to producing patron-only content, and I've renewed my commitment to properly thanking my patrons with each video that I make. There are, of course, other Patreon rewards available for the higher tiers, all of which you can look at on my Patreon page, the link to which will be in the description. This has been, of course, JT Viper, and I am signing off, wishing all of you the happiest of current years.